What you are about to discover has nothing to do with sheer willpower, nor with pretending everything is fine when deep inside it is not. It is not about forcing yourself into a false positivity or battling every negative thought as if you were at war with your own mind. The truth lies much deeper, hidden in a place most people overlook because they are too busy searching for solutions outside themselves. They fail to realize that the only transformation that endures must begin within. Perhaps you've wondered why some people, no matter the storm they face, move through life with a calm that seems almost unshakable. They endure losses, betrayals, even moments when the ground beneath their feet seems to collapse. Yet they remain centered. Meanwhile, others unravel in the face of the smallest inconvenience, trapped in spirals of anxiety and despair. Is this resilience a matter of luck? Is it simply personality? Or is there a hidden principle that separates those who master their inner world from those who are enslaved by it? Here is where most of us go astray. We are taught that reality is objective, that things just happen, and that our emotions are unavoidable consequences of those events. But this is not true. Everything you experience, absolutely everything, is filtered through the way you interpret life, through the beliefs you've carried for years, and through the emotions you never learned to face. It is as though you were wearing tinted glasses that color everything you see. And if those lenses are warped by fear, resentment, or guilt, the world will reflect exactly that distortion. Life does not punish you with unfairness. Rather, it mirrors the filters through which you perceive it. This idea is not new. Philosophers across centuries, from the Stoics of ancient Rome to Buddhist monks in Asia, have repeated a similar truth. The world outside is neutral. It is our mind that paints it as tragedy or triumph. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are pained by anything external, it is not the thing itself that disturbs you, but your judgment about it." And yet, despite this timeless wisdom, most of us still allow the invisible filters of our minds to dictate the quality of our lives. Here lies the key no one ever taught you. Peace is not about avoiding pain, nor about becoming immune to hardship. It is about transforming the meaning you assign to every experience. It is about reprogramming the way you perceive reality and learning to turn every emotion into a tool for growth rather than a burden that keeps you trapped. Reality is not imposed upon you, it is interpreted. And when you grasp this, when you reclaim the power to shape that interpretation, you discover a freedom so profound that nothing and no one can take it from you. Think of it this way. Imagine a child in a village centuries ago watching the same storm roll across the sky. To one child, the storm is terrifying, a sign that the gods are angry. To another, raised with different stories, the storm is a cleansing force, watering the crops and promising abundance. The storm is the same. The difference is the meaning given to it. That is how our lives operate. Every storm we face is interpreted through the myths, beliefs, and memories we carry within. This is why some people remain unshaken in chaos while others collapse. It is not that life spares them suffering. It is that they have learned to master the inner lens. They no longer confuse their filters with reality itself. Today, you are going to see exactly how this mastery is possible. Not through vague ideas, but through principles used for centuries by those who sought inner peace. Mystics in monasteries, Stoic emperors, and modern psychologists like Carl Jung all spoke of the same truth. Liberation does not come from the outside. It begins in the unseen territory within. You will discover how to transform fear into clarity, how to make negative emotions serve you instead of enslave you, and how to reach a serenity so unshakable that even life's harshest trials cannot take it away. But here is the challenge. To access this freedom, you must be willing to question everything you've taken for granted. You must be willing to look within and confront the possibility that the suffering you blamed on the world has, in fact, been shaped by your own mind. It is a difficult task because it requires honesty, courage, and humility. Yet once you do, nothing will ever affect you in the same way again. Imagine your life without those invisible glasses, without the distortions of fear, limiting beliefs, and unhealed emotions. Imagine seeing the world not as a battlefield, but as a mirror, reflecting back to you the lessons you are ready to learn. The truth is this: the mind is not an enemy to be conquered, but a labyrinth to be understood. And within that labyrinth lies the key to freedom. Think of fear. It infiltrates your life without you noticing. It wears different masks. Sometimes it disguises itself as doubt when you ask yourself if you are good enough to take a leap. Sometimes it slips into procrastination, making you delay what you truly desire because failure seems unbearable. At other times, it shows up in your relationships, pushing you to give more than you can afford simply because you dread rejection or loneliness. Carl Jung taught that fear, like all emotions, is not an enemy, but a disguised teacher. Each emotion is a messenger carrying wisdom about what still needs to be faced within you. Yet most people refuse to listen. Instead, they suppress. They convince themselves they should not feel sadness, that anger is shameful, that they must be strong at all times. And so the war against the self begins. But here is the truth: what you resist does not disappear. It grows. A repressed emotion does not vanish. It lingers like a shadow, whispering at the edges of your mind, shaping your reactions and holding you captive. It becomes a weight you carry daily, often without realizing it. Imagine a storm rolling in. The winds howl, the rain lashes, the sky darkens. You stand outside trying to stop it with your bare hands. You push against the wind, you scream at the rain, you strain to resist. But the harder you fight, the more exhausted you become. The storm does not end because you resist it. It passes only when it has run its course. Emotions are no different. They are storms of the inner world. They come, they intensify, they demand to be acknowledged, and then they move on. Yet most people spend their entire lives fighting storms that were only meant to pass. Society deepens this prison. From childhood, we are told, "Don't cry. Be strong. Smile, even if you're hurting." In some cultures, boys are shamed for tears, while girls are told their anger makes them unfeminine. Across centuries, we have mistaken emotional repression for strength. Think of the warriors of ancient Sparta, taught to show no fear, or Victorian England, where stiff upper lip was considered a virtue. These cultural ideals may have forged discipline, but they also carved generations of people unable to face their true feelings. What looks like strength is often only numbness. But numbness is not freedom. It is a cage. A person who suppresses sadness does not become happy. They become brittle. A person who suppresses anger does not become peaceful. They become silent volcanoes, waiting to erupt. This is why our modern world is filled with distractions. Work, entertainment, endless scrolling, shallow relationships, all are ways to drown out the emotions we fear to face. Yet every suppressed emotion is like a letter unopened. Until you read it, you cannot understand what it came to tell you. So what if, instead of fighting the storm, you chose to stand in it? What if, instead of denying sadness, you sat with it long enough to ask what needed release? What if, instead of hiding fear, you listened to the story it whispered? The prison door is never locked. It is our refusal to feel that keeps us inside. The ancient Stoics said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." But mastery does not mean control in the sense of suppression. It means understanding. Just as a sailor cannot command the sea, but learns to read its winds, we cannot force emotions away, but we can learn to navigate them. And when we do, the storms no longer threaten to sink us. They become currents carrying us towards self-knowledge. This is the first great shift, to stop seeing emotions as enemies and begin to see them as guides. And once that shift happens, the prison dissolves. Oops. What once felt like a weight becomes a compass. What once felt like weakness becomes the very doorway to strength. Every emotion carries a hidden message, yet most people never stop long enough to listen. Sadness, for instance, is not simply a weight dragging you down. It is often a signal that something in your life is asking to be released. It may be an attachment to someone who no longer walks with you, an expectation that went unmet, or a dream you must finally lay to rest. When sadness arrives, it is not punishment. It is an invitation to let go. Fear, that ever-present companion, reveals the limiting beliefs that shape our lives. Beneath fear often lies the idea that you are not enough, that you do not deserve what you desire, or that failure is to be avoided at all costs. Fear is the echo of an old story you have been telling yourself, sometimes since childhood. And anger, so often demonized, is in truth a clarion call. It tells you your boundaries have been crossed, that something in your environment disrespects your true self. Anger is the voice of your inner guardian. When you silence it completely, you are not becoming virtuous. You are allowing your inner walls to crumble. When you start to see your emotions not as obstacles, but as guides, something shifts. You stop asking, "Why am I feeling this? How do I get rid of it?" Instead, you ask, "What is this emotion trying to show me?" That single question has the power to change the trajectory of your life. Picture a moment of conflict, an argument with a loved one, a colleague, a friend. In the past, you may have reacted automatically, raising your voice, defending yourself with words that later left you regretful. But now, imagine pausing. Imagine taking a single deep breath and stepping back as if you were not the actor but the audience, watching yourself from the outside. In that pause, you ask, which part of me is reacting right now? Is it truly this present situation, or is it an old wound resurfacing, demanding to be seen? This ability to pause, to observe, is what Carl Jung described as accessing the silent observer. It is the part of your consciousness untouched by storms, the still lake beneath the churning waves. When you find this space within, you realize that nothing outside of you has power unless you grant it. Every insult, every setback, every rejection, they can shake you only if there is already a crack within for them to enter. Cultures across history have understood this in their own ways. Buddhist monks cultivate mindfulness not to escape emotions, but to observe them without attachment. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of misfortune, not to live in fear, but to train their minds to respond with calm when hardship came. Indigenous traditions, too, have long treated emotions as messengers from the spirit, not as enemies to be silenced. Think of how differently life looks through this lens. A wave of sadness no longer feels like drowning. It becomes a tide that comes, crests, and retreats, leaving you clearer than before. Fear no longer paralyzes. It becomes a lantern illuminating the beliefs you are ready to challenge. Anger no longer burns uncontrollably. It becomes a signal pointing to the sacredness of your boundaries. And here lies the paradox. When you stop resisting your emotions, they lose their power to control you. By listening, you disarm them. By welcoming them as teachers, you turn what once enslaved you into guides for your freedom. This is the alchemy of the inner world. To transform storms into lessons, to transform pain into wisdom, and to realize that your inner compass was never broken, it only needed to be read. Carl Jung once compared the psyche to an iceberg. The conscious mind is the tip, visible above the waterline, our thoughts, our reasoning, the self we present to the world. But beneath the surface lies something vast, immeasurable, the unconscious. This hidden territory holds the memories we've buried, the traumas we've never resolved, and the insecurities we rarely dare to name. And most importantly, it contains what Jung called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, deny, or fear, yet which continue to shape our lives from the dark. What we do not make conscious does not disappear. It governs us silently, directing our choices like an invisible hand. Everything we avoid in ourselves returns in the outer world as if it were fate. The anger we repress reappears as constant conflict with others. The fear we bury resurfaces as hesitation at crucial moments. The self-doubt we never question becomes a filter that colors every relationship, every risk, every possibility. Consider the person who has spent a lifetime trying to please others. As a child, they may have learned that love had to be earned, through obedience, through sacrifice, through silence. Now as an adult, they give endlessly, afraid that rejection will come the moment they say no. On the surface, this looks like kindness, but beneath it lies fear, the shadow of abandonment. Until they bring this shadow to light, they remain trapped, believing their worth depends on others' approval. Shadow integration, Jung taught, is not about destroying these hidden parts. It is about illuminating them. It is about acknowledging that the fear of rejection, the shame of failure, the envy you never admit, all of these belong to you, and all of them hold lessons. To deny the shadow is to live half a life, forever haunted by what you refuse to face. To integrate it is to step into wholeness. History offers countless mirrors of this truth. Think of the mighty Achilles of Greek legend. His strength was unmatched, yet it was his single, unacknowledged vulnerability, his heel, that defined his fate. Or consider medieval knights draped in armor, swords gleaming, yet often undone by inner demons of pride, greed, or rage. The shadow unacknowledged always finds its way into the light, often with devastating force. But integration transforms the story. When that person who has spent their life overgiving finally sees the pattern clearly, they reclaim their power. They begin to understand that their worth is not tied to endless sacrifice. They learn to set boundaries without guilt, to say no without fear. And in that moment, something extraordinary happens. Not only do they change, but the world around them begins to change too. People no longer seek them only for what they give, but begin to value who they truly are. This is the essence of shadow work. The parts of you that you fear most, the anger you repress, the jealousy you deny, the fear of rejection you carry, are not curses. They are unopened letters from the unconscious, waiting to be read. When you face them, you dissolve the chains they have wrapped around your life. And so, the path to freedom is not paved with denial, but with courage. The courage to open the door to the basement of the mind and to step inside with a lantern. Because only when you bring light to the shadow does it cease to control you. Only then do you begin to live as your whole self, stronger not because you are flawless, but because you are no longer afraid of what you are. Now imagine another case. A person who has always believed that failure is humiliating. Every time they attempt something new and the outcome falls short, they punish themselves with self-destructive thoughts. They compare their progress with others and always come up lacking. To them, the world seems full of insurmountable obstacles, cruelly placed to remind them of their inadequacy. But here is the question they never ask. What if failure is not a curse, but a teacher? What if every stumble is not the end of the road, but a step along the path? When you shift your perspective, the entire relationship with life changes. Mistakes cease to be evidence of weakness. They become evidence of movement. Falling no longer feels like proof you are unworthy. It becomes proof you dared to walk. As the Japanese proverb says, fall 7 times, stand up 8. In that resilience lies the seed of wisdom. Jung understood this deeply. He wrote that life does not happen to you. It happens through you. Each experience, even the painful ones, is a mirror reflecting something you need to see. Failure in this sense is not a verdict, but a revelation. It shows you where your skills need sharpening, where your beliefs are limiting, where your patience is tested. Seen rightly, Every setback is a disguised instructor. Think of the farmer planting seeds. If he plants weeds, weeds will grow. If he plants wheat, wheat will grow. Our minds work the same way. Every thought we nurture is a seed. If you constantly water the seeds of fear and doubt, you will reap a harvest of hesitation and regret. But if you plant seeds of resilience, curiosity, and courage, even in the soil of failure, you will grow a life rich with growth. History is full of people who learned to treat failure as a teacher rather than a tyrant. Thomas Edison famously remarked after countless unsuccessful experiments, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." J.K. Rowling, rejected by a dozen publishers, allowed those refusals to refine her determination rather than extinguish it. Even ancient myths reflect this truth. The phoenix must burn before it rises, renewed from its ashes. The tragedy is not in falling. It is in never allowing the fall to teach you. When you see failure as shameful, you avoid it at all costs, which means you also avoid growth. But when you accept it as necessary, you lose your fear of trying. Fear dissolves because your worth is no longer tied to the outcome, but to the lessons you gather along the way. And here lies a liberating truth. Every failure carries within it the seed of transformation. The relationship that ends shows you where you abandoned yourself. The business that collapses reveals the resilience you never knew you had. The rejection letter teaches you that your value does not depend on external validation. When you start to see life this way, the cycle of despair breaks. You stop punishing yourself for falling and begin to ask instead, "What is this moment teaching me?" That question turns defeat into momentum. And slowly, the fear that once kept you frozen begins to fade. You no longer dread falling because you know the ground is not an enemy. It is a teacher. Each time you rise stronger, wiser, freer. This is why failure, once reframed, becomes one of life's most powerful allies. Because it strips away illusions, forces you to see yourself clearly, and builds the inner strength no easy victory could ever give. Many of the thoughts that echo in your mind are not truly yours. They were absorbed long ago. In moments when you were too young to question them, perhaps it was a parent's criticism, a teacher's careless remark, or a culture's silent expectation. Without realizing it, you adopted those voices as absolute truths. Over time, they hardened into invisible chains, beliefs that bind you without your consent. Take the person who trembles before speaking up in a meeting. Their anxiety does not come from the present moment, but from echoes of childhood. Perhaps the memory of being silenced, laughed at, or told they were too much. That old voice whispers again in adulthood, "Stay quiet. Don't risk it. You'll only embarrass yourself." And so the past governs the present until they dare to face it. Jung called this process of facing the old patterns shadow integration. It is the work of lifting these echoes into the light, recognizing that they do not belong to the present moment and choosing differently. Because the truth is, the fear you feel today did not begin today. It is an inheritance from an earlier wound. Generations often pass these chains down unconsciously. A child raised by parents who feared scarcity may grow into an adult terrified of financial risk. A family scarred by war may raise children who carry anxiety in their very bones, even without understanding its source. Cultures themselves can carry collective shadows, the silence of trauma after wars, the stoicism after centuries of hardship, the unspoken shame of histories too painful to name. What is unhealed in one generation often becomes the burden of the next. But here lies hope. Chains are not destiny. They are learned, and what is learned can be unlearned. The moment you pause in the middle of your fear and ask, "Whose voice is this truly?" you begin to break free. You realize the anxiety before speaking is not the truth of your present self, but the echo of a child still afraid. You realize the need to please everyone is not a noble trait, but a survival strategy born decades ago. And once you see this, you can choose differently. Picture this in action. You are about to give an important presentation. Fear rises, your hands tremble, your chest tightens. In the past, you would have tried to suppress it or let it paralyze you. But this time, you pause. You breathe. You say to yourself, "This fear does not belong to me today. It belongs to the past." And suddenly, you are no longer reacting from the wound. You are responding from clarity. You speak not from insecurity, but from your conscious self. This practice, pausing, naming, reframing, is how invisible chains dissolve. And every time you do it, you reclaim another piece of yourself. History itself illustrates this truth. Nations, too, repeat cycles until they confront their shadows. Germany, after World War II, could not heal until it faced its past. South Africa could not begin anew until it acknowledged apartheid through truth and reconciliation. In the same way, individuals cannot break free until they face the patterns they inherited. Denial breeds repetition. Awareness creates liberation. And this is the work of breaking invisible chains, realizing you are not condemned to replay the same script forever. You can write a new one. The voices of the past may still whisper, but they no longer command. You begin to live, at last, as the author of your own story. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is the essence of emotional responsibility. As long as you believe your suffering comes only from the outside world, other people's cruelty, life's injustices, the accidents of circumstance, you remain a prisoner. But when you realize that every external disturbance is a mirror of something inside you that has yet to heal, you reclaim your power. Think of an argument that spirals into anger. Words fly, voices rise, wounds are opened. In the past, you may have thought, "They made me feel this way." But if you pause, you might see something else. It was not simply the other person's words, but the old wound their words touched. Perhaps their criticism awoke the child who always feared disapproval. Perhaps their indifference mirrored the parent who once neglected you. The external spark lit a fire that was already waiting inside. This is the shift emotional responsibility demands. Instead of asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" you begin asking, "What part of me is reacting to this?" That question changes everything. It moves you from being a victim of circumstance to being a student of your own soul. Consider a real-life scenario. You are in the middle of a heated conflict at work. A colleague dismisses your idea, and your chest tightens with anger. Before, you might have snapped back, escalating the tension. But this time you pause. You breathe. You ask, "Is it truly their dismissal that wounds me? Or is it the part of me that doubts my own worth?" In that instant, you step into awareness. Instead of reacting blindly, you choose a response born of clarity. This is not weakness. It is mastery. To control your reactions not by suppression, but by understanding, is to take command of your inner world. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus taught, "It is not things themselves that disturb men, but their judgments about these things." Buddhism echoes the same wisdom. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, because suffering is pain multiplied by resistance. Across time and culture, the message is clear. Peace is born not from the world, but from the way you meet it. When you accept emotional responsibility, conflicts no longer feel like injustices, but like mirrors. The person who irritates you most often reflects an aspect of yourself you have not yet integrated. Jung called this the shadow projection. What we condemn most strongly in others is often what we secretly fear or deny in ourselves. The tyrant you despise may mirror your own hunger for control. The liar you detest may mirror the dishonesty you practice in subtle ways. To recognize this is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. History itself testifies to this principle. Entire societies project their unhealed shadows outward. Witch hunts in Europe were not simply about superstition, but about repressing fear, sexuality, and power that society could not face. Wars have often been the eruption of collective shadows, hatreds and fears disowned until they consume nations. What is true for civilizations is true for the individual. What you refuse to face will rule you. But here lies hope. When you take emotional responsibility, the cycle breaks. You stop blaming others for your pain and begin treating every emotion as a message. Anger becomes a reminder to set boundaries. Sadness becomes an invitation to release. Fear becomes a signpost pointing to the beliefs you must challenge. No feeling is wasted. All become teachers. And slowly, life transforms. The same situations that once overwhelmed you lose their grip, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You stop expecting others to carry the burden of your healing. You stop demanding the world rearrange itself to suit your peace. Instead, you cultivate peace within, and in doing so, discover a freedom no circumstance can take away. This is emotional responsibility. The courage to look inward when it would be easier to point outward, the humility to admit that the battlefield is within, and the wisdom to see every conflict not as punishment, but as an opportunity to grow. Many people never change because they cling tightly to the stories they tell about themselves. They repeat them so often they become identities. I'm just too emotional. I've always been insecure. I can't control my reactions. These phrases sound harmless, but they are invisible cages. They are not truths. They are conclusions drawn from years of unchallenged repetition. And the more you believe them, the more you live as if they were destiny. But what if you began to question them? What if each time you thought, I always get hurt, you paused and asked, is this who I am, or is it just a story I've been taught to believe? That simple question can break the spell, because identity is not a fixed sentence. It is a narrative, and narratives can be rewritten. Carl Jung called this integration, the act of bringing into the light what has remained in the shadows, and this integration begins not with denial, but with acceptance. You do not run from pain, you sit with it. You do not repress anger, you acknowledge it. You do not silence fear, you listen to its message. Words, after all, only hold the power you give them. If someone tells you you'll never succeed, those words can wound only if a part of you already fears they are true. But if you have done the inner work, those words dissolve into nothing more than sound, air without weight. Here is where the art of inner silence becomes essential. The modern world is filled with noise, social media feeds, constant notifications, endless voices telling you what you should feel, think, and want. But silence is where you hear your true self. Imagine, even for a few minutes each day, stepping away from all distractions. No phone, no chatter, no obligations. Just you and the quiet. At first, the silence feels uncomfortable because the emotions you've avoided rise to the surface. But if you stay, something extraordinary happens. Beneath the noise, you discover clarity. Spiritual traditions across centuries have understood this. Monks withdraw into monasteries not to escape the world, but to cultivate inner silence so they can hear more deeply. Native American vision quests send seekers into solitude so they can meet themselves without masks. Even the Stoics practiced daily reflection, a kind of silence in which they could examine the day's events and their own reactions. Now imagine applying this in a moment of conflict. Someone makes a hurtful comment, and in the past you would have reacted instantly, letting their words pierce you like arrows. But now, instead of reacting, you pause. You ask, do I need to take this personally, or does this say more about them than it does about me? In that silence, you feel something new, detachment. Not the detachment of apathy, but the clarity of self-respect. You understand that their words cannot define you. Only you can do that. This is not a skill mastered overnight. It is a practice, a returning again and again to the role of the observer rather than the prisoner of emotion. But each time you choose silence over reactivity, you strengthen the foundation of your inner fortress. And soon, situations that once felt unbearable lose their emotional grip. People who used to trigger you no longer hold that power. You begin to live lighter, freer, more yourself than you ever imagined. And here is the paradox. Cultivating silence does not mean you will never feel sadness, anger, or fear again. Those emotions will still come, as storms always do. The difference is that now you will not get stuck in them. You will let them pass through like waves in the ocean, intense for a moment but always fleeting. The ocean itself, your deeper self, remains vast and still. The art of inner silence is not an escape from life, but a return to it. It is the ability to stand in the center of chaos and hear the calm voice within reminding you, you are not your passing emotions. You are the awareness that holds them. Imagine just for a moment what your life would look like if nothing outside of you had the power to disturb your inner balance. If, when others tried to drag you into conflict, you remained unshaken. If, when life delivered unexpected storms, you could observe them not with panic, but with calm detachment. If every emotion, fear, sadness, anger, was no longer an enemy, but a wave passing harmlessly through the vast ocean of your being. This is not a fantasy. It is the state that emerges when you integrate everything we've explored, when you face your shadow instead of denying it, when you decode your emotions instead of repressing them, when you take responsibility for your inner world, and when you cultivate silence amid the noise. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, free from the external influences and unconscious patterns that once controlled you. And here lies the great secret. True freedom is not the absence of difficulty. It is not a world without loss, failure, or criticism. True freedom is the realization that your peace does not depend on any of these things. It is an inner fortress no storm can tear down. Think of a tree rooted deep in the earth. Winds come, branches sway, storms lash, yet the trunk remains steady. The strength of the tree is not in avoiding the wind. It is in the depth of its roots. Your silence, your self-awareness, your integration, these are your roots. And when they run deep, nothing can uproot you. History offers us glimpses of those who lived from this unshakable center. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire beset with war and plague, wrote nightly in his journals about serenity and perspective. Buddhist monks facing persecution still radiated compassion because their peace was not tied to circumstance. Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, walked out not consumed with hatred but with clarity of purpose because he had made peace within himself long before freedom came. You too can live this way. You do not need the world to change before you feel peace. You do not need every person to be kind, every circumstance to be favorable, every outcome to go your way. What you need is to reclaim the power you once gave away, to stop waiting for the outer world to grant you what only the inner world can provide. And once you do, you will notice something extraordinary. The world itself begins to respond differently. The conflicts that used to dominate you lose their sting. The people who once had power over your emotions no longer control you. Opportunities appear where fear once blocked the path. Life begins to mirror your inner state, not your inner chaos. This is true freedom. Not the fragile freedom that comes from controlling circumstances, but the eternal freedom of mastering yourself. The freedom of knowing that peace is yours to cultivate every moment with every choice. And here is the final realization. The peace you have been chasing all along, The serenity you thought was hidden somewhere outside has always been within you, waiting patiently to be recognized. So the question is not whether the world can change to give you peace. The question is, are you willing to change the way you see, the way you respond, the way you live? Because the moment you do, nothing and no one will ever have the power to steal your peace again. That is the beginning of true freedom. If you found these ideas meaningful and want to continue exploring them, consider subscribing, sharing this message, or reflecting on it with someone close to you. Every conversation we start, every insight we spread, helps plant seeds of transformation, not just in us, but in the world around us. And remember this, storms will come, but you are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it.